Hey everybody, it's Carrie and welcome back to another video. So if you guys don't know me, my name is Carrie. I run Traveling Pony Studios, which is a small crochet business that I created last year to help pay for my horse's never-ending medical expenses, and I still have to do that today. And I do all type of content creation on YouTube and some other socials, although admittedly I'm a little lacking in certain areas. I typically do videos that are like crochet with me vlogs, what I crocheted in a week, market overviews, all that fun stuff. If you haven't seen some of my recent vlogs, then I'm actually opening up 2 new stores this weekend. This is Thursday at the time of recording this. Technically, I'm opening up 1 store on Friday and then the 2nd store on Saturday. I have been having a little bit of issues with basically backstock. Every time I have sat down to do a crochet with me video, I haven't really had enough where I have felt like it's really anything to show. Like in my box right now, I just have essentially like 3 axolotls, some whales, some Yodas, 1 mushroom. So nothing where I really want to sit down and be like, hey guys, look at what I crocheted. The main reason is not that I have not been crocheting. I'm averaging typically between 10 to 15 items every single day with crocheting, but pretty much every item I have been making recently has either gone to one of the 4 stores I am doing now. So I have not had much that has been sitting in my box. I assume that will probably change, of course, now that I have gotten the kind of setup and the beginning pieces for these stores together. A lot of the time recently has just honestly been spent just making certain items for these stores. So now that things will hopefully die down a little bit, hopefully, I can focus a little bit more on getting the back stock and going through my list again and getting things just prepared for my next market in October. Because of that, I'm not gonna be doing my what I crocheted in a week weekly video. We're gonna be doing a different video instead. I think about a week or 2 ago, I got a comment on my YouTube. Yes guys, I read every single comment on all of my social media. Sometimes I don't reply to everything, and it's not that I don't want to reply to it, it's simply that I forget. Like, I have horrible memory. I just want to make that extremely clear. And because so much of my day is literally spent working, whether it's with the crochet, whether it's editing, making content, or doing like my horses in my barn, pretty much every minute of the day I'm doing something. Sometimes I also read the comments and then it's like, I just forget because I gotta go do invoices or I gotta go do something like that. So if you comment, I read them all. Don't doubt that. But I did receive a comment and somebody had asked me about some of the patterns that I am no longer doing, which I think is a really good comment, and I'm very thankful for the person who sent this comment in because I'm always looking for ideas from you guys that you guys actually want to see, and so I can answer some of your questions. So in today's video, we're going to be going over a few of the patterns that I have decided to drop. If you don't know, I have a link in my description that basically has all the patterns that I currently use for my crocheting. Now, I always tell people that it's also very beneficial, especially if you're going to be doing markets, to spend your own time researching patterns, especially if they are maybe more used patterns. I definitely do that. Like when I look for my new patterns for every single market, I spend more time than I would like to admit actually researching patterns and finding unique patterns. So I always suggest people to do your own research. Don't just buy patterns because maybe popular people are using them. Honestly, if a ton of popular people are using them, then they're gonna be overused, is my experience. I've talked about this before. I'm starting to see the trend with the loaf cats. I'm just going to be keeping an eye on it because they did not perform as well as they have been at my last market. And part of me is wondering, just because it got shared by so many big creators, that it got blown up so big that I'm starting to see that the market is oversaturated in this area. So that's something I always think about when it comes to patterns. Now, the patterns that I have decided to drop, I actually still have some of the plushies from this pattern. So sometimes I drop patterns because maybe the plushies don't really sell compared to my other stuff. Like, I like to have back stuff. I like to have extras in my bin, of course, and not necessarily come home from the market selling out every single item. But at the same time, if I made something in January and it is now, what, August, and I still have the item, to me, that's just like, okay, this is definitely not an item I will ever make again. Or maybe I revisit in a couple years, but typically once I decide I'm done with a certain pattern, I'm just done with the pattern. Like, I don't get the time to spend on it. Sometimes I drop patterns because of, like I was just talking about, they're oversaturated in the field and everything. You go to a market and you have however many crochet people, and literally if you go there and every single crochet person has one item and it's like everybody's the same, then I typically drop the pattern. Reason for that was I've had a few experiences actually with people coming up to me at markets. I don't know why they gotta ask me in particular, maybe because I try and be really nice and like talkative, but I've had some people that are like, well, why does everybody have the same pattern? And why do I go to all these other crochet and you guys all do the same thing? And I'm like, okay, so after a few little kids coming up to me and being like, why do you all do the same thing? Your price is more, your price is blah, blah, blah. I just decided, you know what? I started trying to do some different things, like the really popular little mushroom men that I feel like I can't never see. I did those once when I was first starting out, and I have not touched that pattern again. And instead I try and do different mushrooms. And so there's just things like that that can make me hesitant to keep doing a pattern. And then of course the last reason is typically just because I truly do not enjoy pattern. Because of the fact that I don't consider my crochet work anymore necessarily a hobby, I do consider this venturing into the small business realm. I would really like to find ways to make this business where it could sustain me better, and maybe not things that I physically have to constantly output product for. But at the end of the day, when I sit back and look at how many hours I spend crocheting, I spend crocheting more hours than most. I am typically crocheting 8 to 10 hours. And when it comes to that, and then I look at the demand I put on myself by doing, 10, 15 items every single day, running another business, all this type stuff, there has to come a point where I also have to sit back and go, you know what, I simply just do not enjoy crocheting certain things. When I first started out, I did a lot of things that I maybe didn't love, just because I thought, oh, well, they're really popular and like people seem really interested and like all this type of stuff. And even items that I were selling, I have dropped simply because of the fact that I don't enjoy doing it. Even though this is a business, and even though my mindset has definitely changed towards crocheting, just in terms of like, when I first started out, it was like, oh, everything was so new and shiny. And now that I've been doing it for over a year, I have a different mindset. And so I'm like, I have to find things that I do enjoy making, or am comfortable literally sitting down and making like 50 to 100 of that in like 2 months. Like, I feel like I've made probably 200 whales recently, like over the past couple months. Like, I have to find things that I'm willing to do that for, and then I'm okay with doing it. So those are pretty much the 3 reasons that typically I would drop a pattern. There are of course other things, but I'm pretty much just gonna go through some of the ones that go off the top of my head and talk about them very briefly to keep this video hopefully short. We don't know. The first one I will start off with is one that should honestly be no secret to anybody who has been following my YouTube channel for a while. And I also want to say, just because I don't like a pattern doesn't mean that I think it's a horrible pattern. Like, some people are like, wow, you're really mean and like that. I'm like, no, it's just me. Like, we all have our own opinions. So the first one, which could be quite controversial because it was very popular, and I still think it's very popular because I still see it at tons of markets, is of course the Mabel the chicken. I made this chicken a handful of times right before it became like super popular. Honestly, I didn't even enjoy making it back then. I don't know, something about it just like always got me so frustrated. I didn't really care for the shape, I didn't care for the stuffing, I didn't care for pretty much anything that I could not care for, I didn't care for. And of course then as time passed by, the Mabel the chicken pattern has become so oversaturated in the market scene. There was a point where I would go to markets, and I kid you not, every single stall had Mabel the chicken. And they would be like 5 crochet vendors. And so I never brought them to my big markets. When I had them, I had like 3 that I brought to my farmers markets. And essentially once I sold them, I just vowed to myself to never make another Mabel the chicken. Personally, not my thing. There are a lot of people who really love this pattern. It's not for me personally. I don't know if it really sells as well as it once did. I know that there are lots of different price points for the Mabel the chicken that I've seen. Like, I know when I used to sell mine, I sold them for about $12. I've seen people sell them for upwards of $25. I don't know. But That's the first one. The second pattern that I have dropped was the free clownfish pattern that I did a couple videos, or actually honestly a couple months ago. It was a free pattern that I found on Instagram, and I think I made, I don't know, 4 of these, and I had specifically made them baby safe, keeping in mind, well, maybe people would want them because they're like Finding Nemo. So I kept that in mind with it, and even with it being baby safe, I have not sold a single one of those clownfish. Like I said, I think I have 4. I still have 4. I keep trying to get rid of them and I cannot get rid of them. I've already decided that once it comes time, if I can hopefully get rid of them, I'm just not gonna be spending any more time or energy trying to do it, because I have not sold a single one since I made them in basically whatever, a couple months back. Another pattern that I'll be dropping is the jellyfish pattern that I typically do. The reason for this, I never really sold that many. Like, I would maybe sell one occasionally, but a lot of times people get pretty confused about like jellyfish. They're like, is it a jellyfish? Is it an octopus? Is it a squid? Nobody ever really knows. And if I'm being 100% honest, when I look at my table, I have a lot of aquatic animals. Like, I have a lot of squids. My squids generally can kind of sell better than my jellyfish. And I just have a lot of animals that kind of fit in that similar realm. The jellyfish always just got overlooked. They aren't the quickest thing to make. Honestly, to me, they take much more time than the squid. So I was like, you know what? I'm just not going to be continuing doing this pattern because I don't really see the purpose or the reason to keep doing it. For the sake of not going into too many big items, I'm not going to talk about any of the really big patterns I do. There are definitely big patterns that I will not be continuing to do, but I think for the sake of like thinking that most people are probably interested more in the small realm, I won't go over the big ones, but I will say I do have a good chunk of big patterns that I will not be making again. If you guys want to hear which patterns specifically, let me know and I'll make that a separate video, because there are definitely a lot that I'm not planning on ever doing again. Another pattern that I will not be doing probably are the chunky bees. I had dropped doing normal bees and then had tested out these chunky bees, and I had made a good deal of them. And it finally took me to the last market to sell my last one that I had for the markets, and then I do have them in stores and I can't sell them in stores. Honestly, I preferred them more than the normal bees because it was just something different, but I just have so much difficulty moving them, and they are technically more work than a standard bee because you are crocheting like the antennas in, and you're doing just like a different shape. You've got bobble stitches. I still have to sew the wings on. I was trying to find something that was different than the standard bee, and instead what I think I'm gonna do, I'm gonna do a trial run of the fuzzy bees that I premiered at the last market. If they continue to do well, then I'll honestly just probably switch over to doing the fuzzy bees, because I feel like even though they are like bees, I'm making them in mini versions, so they're a lot smaller, and I'm also using a different type of yarn. So to me, it still feels like it's kind of new, like it's different than your standard bee that like you would find at most places because of the yarn. I didn't know if I was gonna throw this one in here, but I will throw the next 2 in here. The first one being leggy frogs. This is really difficult for me because I made a ton of leggy frogs. I'm talking a ton, like 25, 30. I am just now getting to the end of my stock on leggy frogs. It's hard because for a while I was not selling any leggy frogs. And then the last couple markets I've done, I've had an occasional like 2, 3 leggy frogs sell in a market. Leggy frogs are another thing that are just so stinking popular that I don't really want to continue making, because I don't know, I just don't like to do things that are super popular and then throwing it in as well, because we're talking about like really popular items, are the little octopus. These are what I started out doing, of course, when I was crocheting, because it was really easy to find. They were simple, no crazy like anything. It was just increases, decreases, all that good stuff. But I occasionally sell them, but I don't know, I don't really enjoy making them. I feel like they're like leggy frogs where most tables are gonna have an octopus at some point, and it's just not something that I necessarily want to do. Even if I sell a couple, maybe at a market, I don't know if it's really worth it to me in the end. One of the things I really want to focus on with my brand, and one of the things that I really try and do for my customers, is have a vast variety of crochet items that you would not find typically. So those things being like ladybugs, capybaras, hippos, giraffes, just like I try and do a lot of variety so that when people come into my tent, they know that there's probably an option for everybody. That's a really big important thing for me. So I try and go more for unique thing. I try and go for just a ton of different animals and try and stay away from super popular patterns, because I don't know, it's like you could get that at anybody's booth, and 9 out of 10, if somebody knows that like somebody down the road has like a leggy frog, they're gonna look at yours and then they go running down to that tent and they're like, oh, let me check the quality, let me check the price, like let me do all of this. And then it's just, it frustrates me, it's annoying. I have had that happen at the last couple markets, and because of that, I do stay away from more of these common items. And that's why you find that a lot of times now, most of the patterns I'm dropping are your common items. To me, it's just not really worth continuing. It doesn't fit with the brand and what I want to do with my crochet work. So I think those are a good starting point. Like I said, if you guys are interested in hearing the other ones, because of course, there are more patterns that I'm dropping. Just because it's in the list that I provide does not mean that those are patterns that I do or patterns that I think sell really well. They're just patterns that I've done, and I want to provide the links so you guys can go support the people if you want to, but that doesn't mean they're like a great pattern for selling. There are definitely more patterns that I'm dropping. There are definitely more patterns I'm adding. The thing about crochet is you can drop it and you can come back to it, or you can add it and then you drop it. Like there's no set thing, but I do believe that a lot of times with these patterns that I've discussed, besides leggy frogs and octopus, something that I'm really like, I don't really know, I just kind of have to think about it more. The other ones are patterns that I will not be doing again. I know that in the bottom of my heart, very deeply. You won't find me making a Mabel. But that's basically everything I have for you guys. Please feel free to ask questions, because if you guys ask questions and they're good for videos, then I will make a video answering your question. And I want to say a huge thank you again to the person who requested this video and asked this question. I hope you guys have an amazing rest of the day. Look forward to the next video, which is going to be coming out probably at the beginning of next week, which will be focusing on the setting up the 2 stores, prepping, all that fun stuff. So I hope you guys have an amazing rest of the day, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!